The morning of my 45th birthday started like any other Tuesday. I woke up next to my husband of 20 years, made coffee in our pristine suburban kitchen, and prepared for another day of maintaining the perfect illusion I built. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and for most of my adult life, I'd been living a lie so convincing that I sometimes forgot the truth buried beneath it. I met David in college when I was 22. He was kind, ambitious, and came from a good family. Everyone said we made a beautiful couple. My parents adored him. My friends were jealous. And I convinced myself that the lack of passion I felt was just maturity, that real love was about companionship. Not fireworks. What I didn't tell anyone was that I'd known since I was 15 that I was attracted to women. Growing up in a conservative small town in the Midwest during the 90s, that wasn't something you admitted. It wasn't even something you fully acknowledged to yourself. So I buried it deep, dated boys, and learned to play the part expected of me. David proposed after graduation, and I said yes because it seemed like the natural next step. We had a beautiful wedding with 200 guests. I wore my grandmother's veil. I smiled in every photograph. And on our honeymoon in Hawaii, I cried silently in the bathroom while my new husband slept. Wondering what I'd just done, the years passed in a blur of ordinary moments. We bought a house with a white picket fence. David climbed the corporate ladder while I built a successful career as a graphic designer, working mostly from home. We hosted dinner parties, went to couples game nights, and talked about maybe having children someday, though I always found reasons to postpone that conversation. From the outside, we were living the American dream. Inside, I was suffocating. I kept myself busy to avoid thinking too deeply. I threw myself into work, took up yoga, joined a book club, volunteered at the local animal shelter. I had friends, hobbies, and a comfortable life. Most days I could almost convince myself I was happy, but then there were the moments when the facade would crack. I'd see two women holding hands at the grocery store and feel an ache so profound it took my breath away. I'd watch romantic movies with female leads and have to excuse myself to compose my emotions. I'd lie awake at night next to David, feeling more alone than if I'd been sleeping by myself. The worst part was the guilt. David was a good man. He didn't deserve to be married to someone who couldn't fully love him the way he deserved. But I convinced myself that what we had was enough, that companionship and friendship were a solid foundation, even if passion was missing. I also carried guilt about living inauthentically. Somewhere deep inside, a voice kept asking, is this really all there is? Is this the life you want to live until you die? As my 45th birthday approached, these questions grew louder. Everything changed on a rainy Wednesday afternoon in March. I'd been working from home on a branding project for a new client when I hit a creative wall. Needing a change of scenery, I grabbed my laptop and headed to a coffee shop I'd never been to before, one on the other side of town. Far from my usual haunts, the place was called The Daily Grind, and it had that perfectly imperfect aesthetic that made you want to spend hours there. Exposed brick walls, mismatched vintage furniture, and the rich aroma of freshly ground coffee beans. Jazz played softly in the background. I ordered a latte and found a corner table near the window, watching the rain streak down the glass as I opened my laptop. For the next hour, I lost myself in color palettes and font choices, occasionally sipping my coffee. Is the seat taken? The voice made me look up. And when I did, the world seemed to tilt slightly on its axis. She was standing there with a coffee cup in one hand and a worn paperback in the other, looking at the empty chair across from me. She had dark curly hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, warm brown eyes, and a gentle smile that made something in my chest flutter. "Oh no, please," I managed to say, gesturing to the chair. "Thanks. Everywhere else is packed." She sat down, set her book on the table, and took a sip of her coffee. "I'm Elena, by the way. Sarah." I returned her smile, trying to ignore the way my heart was beating faster. We worked in comfortable silence for a while, but I found myself increasingly distracted. I kept stealing glances at her over my laptop screen. There was something magnetic about her presence, an ease and confidence that drew me in. Eventually, she caught me looking and smiled. "Anything interesting?" I felt my cheeks flush. "Sorry, I was just..." "Your book? Is that Margaret Atwood?" "Yes, The Blind Assassin." "Have you read it?" That question led to a conversation that lasted for 2 hours. We talked about books, art, travel, and life. I learned that Elena was a high school English teacher who was on spring break. She'd moved to the area 6 months ago from California and was still exploring the city. She was funny, thoughtful, and had a way of listening that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. I couldn't remember the last time I felt so engaged in a conversation when she finally checked her watch and said she needed to go. I felt a pang of disappointment. But before she left, she did something that would change everything. "This was really nice," she said, gathering her things. "I don't know many people here yet. Would you maybe want to grab coffee again sometime? As friends?" "I'd love that," I said, probably too quickly. We exchanged numbers, and I watched her walk out into the rain, something stirring inside me but I kept dormant for decades. Elena and I started meeting regularly for coffee. It became the highlight of my week, sometimes twice a week. We'd sit in that same coffee shop or sometimes walk through the park, talking about everything and nothing. I told David I'd made a new friend for my book club, which wasn't entirely a lie since Elena and I did talk about books constantly. He was happy I was getting out of the house more and didn't ask many questions. With each meeting, I felt myself coming alive in a way I hadn't experienced in years. Elena made me laugh. She challenged my thinking. She remembered small details from our previous conversations. When I talked about my design work, she looked at my portfolio with genuine interest and asked insightful questions. I tried to convince myself it was just friendship, but I knew I was lying to myself again. I thought about her constantly. I'd catch myself smiling at random memories of things she'd said. I'd check my phone hoping for a text from her. I planned my outfits for our coffee dates with more care than I'd taken with my appearance in years, and then there was the night I dreamed about her. I woke up gasping, my heart racing, the dream still vivid in my mind. It had been intimate, tender, everything I'd never let myself imagine with another person. I lay there in the darkness next to my sleeping husband, reality crashing down on me. I was 45 years old, married for 2 decades, and falling in love with a woman. The realization terrified me. Everything I'd built, my marriage, my reputation, my carefully constructed life, was at risk. I thought about my parents, my in-laws, David's family, our friends, our whole social circle. The potential fallout was enormous. I briefly considered ending the friendship with Elena. It would be the safe choice, the responsible choice. I could go back to my comfortable numbness and pretend this awakening had never happened, but I couldn't do it. The thought of not seeing Elena again, of not hearing her laugh or discussing literature over coffee, felt unbearable. For the first time in my life, I was experiencing what it felt like to genuinely connect with someone on every level, intellectually, emotionally, and yes, physically. Even though nothing had happened between us, I decided to be honest with her. Or at least as honest as I could be. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon in late April when I asked Elena if we could take a walk instead of our usual coffee shop meeting. She agreed, and we met at the botanical gardens on the edge of town. Spring was in full bloom. Cherry blossoms drifted through the air like pink snow. We walked the winding paths, and I tried to gather my courage to say what I needed to say. "Can I ask you something personal?" I finally said as we sat on a bench overlooking a pond. "Of course," Elena replied, turning to face me. I took a deep breath. Do you date women?" There was a pause, and I immediately regretted asking. But then Elena smiled gently. "Yes, I do." "I'm gay, Sarah. I thought you might have guessed." I wasn't sure, I admitted. I hoped. I wondered, "And you?" She asked softly. "Is that why you're asking?" This was it. The moment where I either kept lying or stepped into the truth. My hands were shaking, but I forced the words out. "I've been married to a man for 20 years. Everyone thinks I'm straight. I've spent my entire adult life convincing everyone, including myself, that I'm straight." I paused, feeling tears building. "But I'm not. I don't think I ever was." Elena reached over and took my hand. The simple touch sent electricity through my entire body. "That must have been incredibly difficult," she said. "I've never said it out loud before," I whispered. "I've never admitted it to anyone." We sat there for a long moment, her hand in mine, and I felt something shift fundamentally inside me. The secret I carried for 30 years was finally in the open, at least with one person. "What are you going to do?" Elena asked gently. "I don't know," I admitted. "My whole life is built on this lie. My marriage, my relationships with family and friends, everything. How do I undo all of that?" You don't have to decide everything right now, Elena said. But Sarah, you deserve to be happy. You deserve to live authentically. What if I'm too old to start over? What if it's too late? Elena squeezed my hand. 45 isn't too old. It's never too late to be who you really are. I looked at her then, really looked at her, and saw something in her eyes that mirrored what I was feeling. It wasn't just me. Whatever this connection was, she felt it too. Elena, I said quietly, I need to tell you something else. These past few months, getting to know you, it's been more than friendship for me. I know, she interrupted gently. I feel it too. And there it was. The truth laid bare between us. But I'm married, I said, the words feeling hollow even as I spoke them. I know that too. And I'm not asking you to do anything you're not ready for. But I also can't pretend I don't have feelings for you. We sat in that garden for hours, talking through the complexity of the situation. Elena told me about her own journey of coming out in her 20s, the challenges she'd faced, and the freedom she'd ultimately found in living as her authentic self. The closet feels safe, she said, but it's also a prison. And the longer you stay, the harder it becomes to leave. When we finally parted that day, I didn't know what I was going to do. But I knew I couldn't keep living the way I had been. The next few weeks were the most difficult of my life. I went through the motions at home, but I felt like I was watching myself from outside my body. Every interaction with David felt like a betrayal, both of him and of myself. I started seeing a therapist, telling David the first needed help with anxiety and stress from work. It wasn't entirely untrue. My anxiety was through the roof, and I was barely sleeping. Dr. Patricia Chen was in her 60s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense approach. In our first session, I spent the entire hour crying as I told her everything, my childhood awareness of being different, my decision to marry David, my decades of suppression, and my feelings for Elena. What do you want, Sarah? Dr. Chen asked me during our third session. It was such a simple question, but I realized I'd never asked it of myself. I'd spent my entire life doing what was expected, what was safe, what would make others happy. I'd never considered what I actually wanted. I want to be honest, I said finally. I want to stop pretending. I want to know what it feels like to be in love with someone who I'm truly attracted to. I want to wake up and not feel like I'm living someone else's life. And what's stopping you? Everything. My husband, my family, my reputation, the judgment, the disruption. I'm terrified of hurting David. He's a good person. He doesn't deserve this. You're right that he doesn't deserve to be lied to, Dr. Chen said gently. But staying in a marriage where you can't be your authentic self doesn't protect him. It keeps both of you from the possibility of finding real, reciprocal love. That hit me hard. I'd been telling myself I was staying for David's sake. But I was also staying because change was terrifying. Dr. Chen helped me see that I had to tell David the truth. Regardless of what I decided about my future with Elena, he deserved to know who he was actually married to. I spent 2 more weeks preparing myself, writing and rewriting what I wanted to say. Elena and I had agreed to put some distance between us while I sorted things out, though we still texted occasionally. She was patient and supportive, never pressuring me, finally. On a Sunday evening in early May, I asked David if we could talk. We sat across from each other at our dining room table, the same table, where we'd hosted countless dinner parties, celebrated anniversaries, and shared thousands of meals. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clasp them together in my lap. David, there's something I need to tell you. It's going to be difficult to hear, but you deserve the truth. He looked confused and worried. Are you okay? Are you sick? No, nothing like that. I took a deep breath. I haven't been honest with you. I haven't been honest with you for our entire marriage, actually. And I can't do it anymore. Sarah, you're scaring me. What's going on? I'm gay, David. I'm a lesbian. I have been my whole life. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched his face go through a series of emotions: confusion, disbelief, shock, hurt. What? He finally said, I don't. What are you saying? I'm saying that when I married you, I knew I was attracted to women. I thought I could ignore it, bury it, make it go away. I thought companionship would be enough. But it's not. And it's not fair to you. 20 years, he said, his voice breaking. We've been married for 20 years and you're telling me this now? I know. I'm so sorry. Is there someone else? His eyes were filling with tears. Is that what this is about? I could have lied, but I'd done enough of that. I've developed feelings for someone, yes. But David, that's not why I'm telling you this. I would need to tell you this even if there wasn't anyone else. I can't keep living this lie. He stood up abruptly, knocking his chair backward. I can't. I have to go. He grabbed his keys and left. I heard his car start and pull out of the driveway. Then I was alone in the house we'd shared for 15 years, and I broke down completely. Over the next few days, David stayed with his brother. We communicated through terse text messages about logistics. He was angry, hurt, and feeling betrayed, all of which I understood and felt I deserved. When he finally came home, we had a longer conversation. He asked questions I tried to answer honestly. He wanted to know if I'd ever loved him, if our entire marriage had been a lie, if he'd done something wrong. I did love you, I told him. I do love you, just not in the way you deserve to be loved. You didn't do anything wrong. This is about who I am, not about anything you did or didn't do. Were you ever attracted to me? He asked quietly. I cared about you deeply. I enjoyed your company. But physical attraction? No, I'm sorry, but no. That answer seemed to hurt him more than anything else. We decided to separate. David would stay in the house while we worked out the divorce details. I moved into a small furnished apartment across town, taking only clothes and my work equipment. Telling our families was next up. My parents took the news worse than I'd anticipated. They were devout Catholics who had always valued appearances and social standing. When I told them over the phone that David and I were divorcing because I was gay, there was a long, painful silence. This is a phase, my mother finally said. You're going through a midlife crisis. People don't just wake up gay at 45. I didn't wake up gay, Mom. I've always been this way. I just hid it. If you'd prayed more, seen a priest, you could have overcome these feelings, she continued, her voice tight. Now you're throwing away a perfectly good marriage for what? A sinful lifestyle? My father got on the line. Sarah, we raised you better than this. What will people think? What will we tell our friends? Tell them the truth, I said, feeling surprisingly calm despite the tears streaming down my face. Tell them your daughter is gay and finally stop lying about it. My mother started crying. My father said they needed time to process this and hung up. We didn't speak for 3 months. David's family was more sympathetic to him than hostile to me, which I appreciated. His mother called me once to say she was sorry things had turned out this way and that she wished me happiness, which was more grace than I probably deserved. My younger sister, Jennifer, was surprisingly supportive. I always wondered, she admitted when I told her. There was something about you that seemed, I don't know, not quite present in your marriage. I thought maybe you were just unhappy, but this makes sense. You're not upset with me? Sarah, you're my sister. I want you to be happy. Yeah, the way you went about this wasn't great, and I feel bad for David. But I also can't imagine living a lie for 20 years. That must have been torture. Her support meant more than I could express. My friends were a mixed bag. Some rallied around me with support and understanding. Others distanced themselves, either out of loyalty to David or discomfort with my revelation. I lost several friendships I maintained for years, which hurt. But I understood it was part of the cost of finally living truthfully. The hardest part was seeing the pain I'd caused David. He was angry for a long time, and rightfully so. But eventually, through mediation and therapy, we managed to have civil conversations. He started dating someone new within a few months, which I was happy about. He deserved to find someone who could love him fully. Through all of this, Elena remained a steady presence. We'd agreed not to officially date until my divorce was finalized, but we still saw each other regularly as friends. She was patient and understanding, never pushing for more than I was ready to give. My divorce was finalized in November, 6 months after I told David the truth. It was a dreary Tuesday afternoon when I signed the final papers. I should have felt sad, but instead I felt free. That evening, Elena came over to my apartment with a bottle of wine and takeout Thai food. We sat on my secondhand couch, eating pad Thai and talking about the future. How are you feeling? She asked. Relieved, scared, excited, guilty, all of it at once. That's understandable. I set down my wine glass and turned to face her fully. Elena, these past months you've been so patient with me. You've supported me through this whole mess without asking for anything in return. Why? She smiled. Because I knew you were worth waiting for. And because I've been where you are, maybe not in the exact same situation, but I know what it's like to finally step into who you really are. It's terrifying and exhilarating all at once. I want to do this right, I said. I want to actually date you properly. Take you to dinner, hold your hand in public, introduce you to people as my girlfriend. I want all of it. I want that too. I leaned in and kissed her. It was my first kiss with a woman, my first real kiss with anyone, if I'm being honest. Everything I'd felt with David paled in comparison to the electricity, the rightness, the coming home feeling of kissing Elena. When we pulled apart, I was crying. Happy tears? She asked, wiping them away gently. The happiest. For the first time in my life, I feel like myself. We took things slowly, savoring every moment of discovery. Our first official date was at a nice Italian restaurant on the other side of town. I was nervous about being seen together romantically, but Elena took my hand across the table and said, "You don't have to hide anymore, Sarah. Not with me, not with anyone." She was right. I'd spent 45 years hiding, and I was done. Over the following months, we built a relationship based on honesty, mutual respect, and genuine attraction. We went to art galleries and independent movies. We cooked dinner together in my tiny apartment kitchen. We stayed up late talking about books and dreams and the future. I met her friends, an eclectic group of teachers, artists, and activists who welcomed me warmly. I introduced her to my sister and her family. Jennifer's kids called her Aunt Elena within a month. Being with Elena showed me what I'd been missing all those years. It wasn't just about physical attraction, though that was a revelation in itself. It was the emotional intimacy, the feeling of being fully known and accepted. The joy of building a life with someone who saw and loved the real me. A year after my divorce, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and necessary. I came out publicly on social media. I've been gradually more open about my relationship with Elena. Posting photos of us together and referring to her as my girlfriend. But I never explicitly stated that I was gay. I decided to write a post on the anniversary of the day I told David the truth. 1 year ago today, I finally told the truth about who I am. I wrote, I'm a 46-year-old lesbian who spent most of her life hiding in fear. I hurt people I cared about because of that fear, and I'll always carry regret about the pain I caused. But I also know that living authentically is the greatest gift I've ever given myself. To anyone struggling with their identity, whatever age you are, it's never too late to be who you really are. The post went semi-viral within my circles. I received hundreds of messages, some supportive, some not. But the ones that mattered most were from other women, many my age or older, who thanked me for sharing my story. Several told me they'd been living similar double lives, and my posts had inspired them to consider their own truth. One message in particular stuck with me. It was from a 52-year-old woman named Margaret who'd been married for 30 years. I read your post and cried for 2 hours, she wrote. I thought I was the only one. Thank you for showing me I'm not alone. I realized then that my story, while painful, might help others. I started a blog where I wrote more extensively about my journey. It became a space where women from all over the world shared their own stories of late life coming out, of living with secrets, of finding courage to change. My relationship with my parents slowly improved. They attended family events where Elena was present, though they were formal and distant. It wasn't the warm acceptance I'd hoped for, but it was something. My mother told me once, hesitantly, I may not understand this, but you're my daughter and I love you. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. David and I eventually developed a cordial relationship. We'd see each other occasionally at mutual friends' events. He remarried 2 years after our divorce to a kind woman named Rachel, and they seemed genuinely happy. I was glad he'd found that my career actually flourished after I came out. I'd been afraid it would suffer, but instead I felt more creative and inspired than I had in years. I rebranded my design business with a focus on working with LGBTQ+ organizations and nonprofits. Finding deep satisfaction in using my skills to support causes I believed in, Elena and I moved in together after 2 years of dating. We bought a small house with a garden where she grew vegetables, and I set up a home studio. We adopted 2 rescue dogs and fell into easy domestic rhythms that felt nothing like the performance my marriage had been taught now. At 48, I often think about the 2 halves of my life. There's the before 45 years of hiding, pretending, living for everyone except myself. And there's the after these past 3 years of authenticity, love, and self-acceptance. I won't lie and say coming out solved all my problems or made everything perfect. I still deal with lingering guilt about how I handled my marriage. I still have complicated relationships with some family members. I still encounter prejudice and have lost friendships that I valued, but I've also found a joy and peace I never knew existed. I wake up next to someone I'm madly in love with. I live in a home that feels like mine. I do work that fulfills me. I have a community of people who know and accept the real me. People sometimes ask if I regret waiting so long to come out. It's a complicated question. I wish I'd had the courage to be honest earlier, especially for David's sake. Those 20 years we spent together could have been spent finding partners who could truly love us the way we deserved, but I also know that we all work within the constraints of our circumstances. I came of age in a time and place where being openly gay felt impossible. I did what I thought I needed to do to survive. And while I can't change the past, I can make sure the rest of my life is lived honestly. To anyone reading this who sees themselves in my story, I want you to know it's never too late. Whether you're 25, 45, or 65, you deserve to live as your authentic self. Yes, there will be challenges. Yes, there will be pain. Some people will reject you. Some relationships will end, but you will also find freedom, joy, and a sense of rightness that makes it all worthwhile. You'll discover that the people who truly love you will love the real you, not the version you've been performing. You'll sleep better at night. You'll look in the mirror and recognize the person staring back. Elena and I are talking about getting married next year. It's surreal to think that I'll be nearly 50 when I walk down the aisle in a relationship that actually reflects who I am. My first wedding was beautiful and perfect and entirely wrong. My second wedding will probably be smaller and simpler, but it will be real. I think about the woman I was at 45, sitting in that coffee shop about to meet Elena for the first time. She had no idea how much her life was about to change. She was terrified and closeted and convinced it was too late for her. I wish I could go back and tell her that the scariest decision she ever make will also be the best one. That on the other side of that fear is a life more vibrant and authentic than she could imagine. That she's stronger and braver than she knows, but she figured it out on her own. And when she does, she understands that 45 isn't too old to start living. It's just old enough to know how precious that life is. What I didn't anticipate when I came out was how it would affect the other people in my life beyond my immediate circle. About 6 months after my public social media post, I received an unexpected phone call from someone I hadn't spoken to in over 15 years. Sarah? It's Monica. Monica Reeves. We were in college together. I had to think for a moment before the memory clicked. Monica had been in my dorm freshman year, a quiet, studious woman who transferred to another school after our second year. We'd been friendly but never close. Monica, wow. How are you? I'm calling because I saw your post. The one about coming out. Her voice wavered. Sarah, I'm 53 years old. I've been married for 28 years. And I've been lying to myself and everyone else for my entire adult life. We talked for 2 hours. Monica's story was eerily similar to mine, a conservative upbringing. Awareness from a young age that she was different, a decision to marry a man and hope the feelings would fade. They never did. I thought I was the only one, she said, crying. I thought I was a monster for living this lie for so long. But then I saw your post and realized, maybe I'm not alone. Maybe it's not too late for me either. It's not, I told her. Monica, it's never too late. That conversation was the first of many. Through my blog and social media presence, I connected with dozens of women who were living double lives. Some were in their 30s, having married young. Others were in their 60s and 70s. Having spent the majority of their lives in heterosexual marriages, each story was unique. But the common threads were always there: fear, shame, the desperate hope that the feelings would change, the slow suffocation of living inauthentically, and the terror of disrupting an entire life. I started hosting monthly online support groups for women considering coming out later in life. We'd meet on video calls, sometimes with cameras off for those who weren't ready to be visible, and share our experiences, fears, and strategies for moving forward. One woman, Patricia, was 71 and had been married for 50 years. "My husband has dementia now," she told the group, tears streaming down her face. "He doesn't even remember who I am most days." And I'm sitting here thinking, is it too late? Is there any point in coming out now? The group rallied around her, showing that the point wasn't about finding a new relationship, though that could be a beautiful part of it. The point was about finally claiming your truth, about living the rest of your days as yourself, about not dying with your secrets still locked inside. Patricia did come out 6 months later. She told her adult children, who were surprisingly supportive. She started attending a senior LGBTQ support group and made friends who knew and accepted her. She told me later that even though she didn't pursue a romantic relationship at her age, simply acknowledging who she had lifted a weight she'd been carrying for 7 decades. These connections showed me that my story was part of something much larger, a hidden epidemic of women who'd been conditioned to suppress their true selves for the comfort and expectations of others. 2 years after my divorce, I ran into David at a bookstore. We hadn't seen each other in several months, and I almost didn't recognize him at first. He looked healthier, happier. There was a lightness to him that I'd never seen during our marriage. "Sarah," he said, spotting me near the fiction section. "How are you?" We decided to grab coffee at the bookstore cafe, an echo of where my journey with Elena had begun. It felt surreal to sit across from the man I'd spent 20 years with, both of us completely different people than we'd been. "You look good," I said, and meant it. "So do you?" "Really good, actually. I can see it in your face you're happier." "I am." "I'm so sorry it came at your expense, David." He was quiet for a moment, stirring his coffee. "I've been in therapy," he said finally. "A lot of therapy. And I've worked through a lot of anger and hurt. But I've also come to understand some things." "What things?" "I always knew something was missing between us. I told myself it was normal, that movies and books made love seem more passionate than it really is. But deep down, I knew. I think I always knew you weren't fully present with me. I just didn't want to admit it." His words hit me hard. "David, let me finish," he said gently. "I'm not saying this to make you feel worse. I'm saying it because I've realized we were both living half-lives. You were hiding who you were, and I was pretending not to notice. Neither of us was being fully honest. I should have been braver earlier," I said. "Maybe, but I also should have asked harder questions instead of accepting the surface level of our relationship. We were both complicit in the illusion, Sarah. It wasn't just you." This perspective, this sharing of responsibility, felt like an unexpected gift. We talked for over an hour about our marriage, our divorce, and what we'd both learned. "Rachel knows everything," he told me. "About you, about our marriage, all of it. And you know what? It's made our relationship stronger. I'm not settling anymore. I'm not accepting good enough, and neither is she. I'm really happy for you, David, genuinely. I'm happy for you too. I see your post with Elena. You look at her the way you never looked at me, and honestly, I'm glad you found that. Everyone deserves to have someone look at them that way." When we parted that day, we hugged a real hug, not the perfunctory embraces we'd exchanged toward the end of our marriage. There was closure in that moment and a mutual understanding that while our marriage had been a mistake, it had also been a necessary part of both our journeys. One evening, about 3 years into our relationship, Elena and I were having dinner at home when she brought up something I'd never really asked her about. "Can I tell you what it was like for me?" she asked. "Meeting you, watching you go through everything, waiting while you figured things out." "Of course. I've been so focused on my own experience, I never really asked about yours." She set down her fork and thought for a moment. "When I first met you at that coffee shop, I knew immediately. Not that you were gay necessarily, but that there was something, a spark, a connection. And then as we kept meeting, I could see you struggling with something beneath the surface. You never said anything. How could I? You were married. You hadn't come out to yourself yet, let alone to me. But I'd be lying if I said it wasn't hard. I'd fallen for you pretty quickly, and I knew I had to be patient, but there were moments when I wondered if you'd ever be ready to face it. Did you ever think about walking away? Yes, she admitted. There were nights when I'd go home after seeing you and think, this is going to break your heart, Elena. She's never going to leave him. She's never going to choose this life. But then I'd see you again, and I'd see how alive you were in our conversations, how present, and I couldn't walk away. What was the hardest part? Watching you suffer, she said without hesitation. Seeing the pain in your eyes when you talk about your marriage. Or when we'd see other couples and you'd get this look on your face like you were mourning something you'd never had. I wanted to tell you it could be different, that you deserved more, but you had to come to that realization yourself. I'm sorry I put you through that. Don't be sorry. Sarah, you gave me something too. Watching your courage, seeing you choose authenticity even when it cost you everything, that was beautiful. It reminded me why I came out in my 20s even though it was hard. It reminded me that living truthfully is always worth it. She reached across the table and took my hand. And now I get to wake up every morning next to the woman I love who's finally fully herself. That was worth the wait. These conversations deepen my appreciation not just for Elena, but for the complexity of what we'd both gone through. Her patience and understanding hadn't been passive. They'd been active choices she made every day. Even when it was difficult, one of the most unexpected joys of living openly has been the impact on younger people in my life. My niece, Lily, my sister Jennifer's daughter, came out as bisexual when she was 16. She called me first before telling her parents. Aunt Sarah, I need to tell you something, she said over the phone, her voice shaking. I think I like girls. And boys. But definitely girls. Okay, I said gently. Tell me about it. She talked for an hour about a girl in her class, about her confusion, about her fear of telling her parents even though she knew they'd be supportive. But you get it, she said. You understand what it's like to be scared. I do. And Lily, I want you to know something. You don't have to wait until you're 45 to be yourself. You don't have to spend decades hiding. You can choose differently than I did. Aren't you scared I'll face discrimination? That it'll be hard? Yes, it might be hard sometimes. But you know what's harder? Living a lie. Pretending to be someone you're not. Waking up every day feeling like you're wearing a costume. She came out to her parents the next week. Jennifer called me crying happy tears. Thank you for being there for her, she said. Thank you for showing her it's possible to be open about who you are. Lily's now in college, openly dating women and thriving. She recently told me that knowing my story made her realize she didn't want to waste years hiding. You gave me a roadmap of what not to do, she said with a laugh. But also what courage looks like. I also started speaking at local high schools and colleges about LGBTQ+ issues and the importance of living authentically. During one talk at a community college, a young woman approached me afterward. My mom is like you were, she said quietly. She's 47, married to my dad, but I know. I've always known. She looks at women the way other women look at men. She watches Ellen DeGeneres like someone dying of thirst looks at water. But she's never said anything. Have you talked to her about it? No, I don't know how. I don't want to blow up our family. I gave her my email address. Tell her about my blog. Tell her there are other women like her. She doesn't have to live in hiding forever. And maybe if she's ready to talk, I'm here. The young woman's mother did reach out to me several months later. We had a long phone conversation, and she eventually joined one of my support groups. She hasn't come out to her family yet, but she's working with a therapist and taking steps toward honesty. Her daughter knows and is supporting her through the process. These interactions showed me that living openly isn't just about my own freedom. It creates permission for others to live freely. Elena and I got married in a small ceremony in our backyard on a perfect Saturday in June. It was nothing like my first wedding. There were only 30 people there, close friends, chosen family, my sister and her family, and a few of Elena's relatives who'd flown in from California. My parents didn't come. My mother had sent a card saying they couldn't support this decision, but they wished me well. It hurt, but I'd made peace with the fact that their acceptance might never come. Some losses are permanent, and that's part of the cost of authenticity. Instead of traditional white dresses, Elena wore a beautiful teal suit and I wore a flowing lavender dress. We wrote our own vows, standing under an arch of wildflowers that our friends had helped arrange. Sarah, Elena said, her eyes shining with tears. You taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's choosing truth even when you're terrified. You showed me that it's never too late to become who you're meant to be. I promise to honor your journey, to create a home where you never have to hide, and to love you exactly as you are for the rest of my life. My own vows came from the deepest part of my heart. Elena, you saw me before I could see myself. You waited patiently while I found my courage. You showed me what real love feels like, not the comfortable companionship I'd settled for, but the soul-deep connection I didn't know was possible. I promised to never take this gift for granted, to live openly and honestly, and to build a life with you that reflects the truth of who we both are. We exchanged simple gold bands, and when the officiant, a lesbian minister from a local inclusive church, pronounced us married, the backyard erupted in cheers. Our friends had hung rainbow flags and paper lanterns everywhere, and as the sun set, the whole scene glowed with warmth and joy. During the reception, my sister gave a toast that made everyone cry. I've known Sarah my whole life, Jennifer said, and I've never seen her as happy as she is right now. For years, I watched my sister go through the motions of a life that didn't quite fit. And now I see her fully alive, fully herself, fully in love. Elena, thank you for loving my sister the way she deserves to be loved. And Sarah, thank you for finally choosing yourself. David's words at my first wedding have been about building a future together, about partnership and stability. They've been nice words, safe words, but they lacked the fire of real passion and recognition. This wedding was different. Every word spoken was true. Every embrace was genuine. Every tear was earned. I was marrying someone who knew all of me, my mistakes, my fears, my journey, and chose me anyway. And I was finally the person at my own wedding. Not a performer playing a role doll as Elena and I danced our first dance to Brandi Carlile's The Joke. I looked around at the faces of people who'd supported us, who'd stood by me through the hardest transition of my life, and I felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This family, this chosen family of friends and allies, was worth every difficult conversation. Every lost friendship, every painful revelation about my career took an unexpected turn in my late 40s. What had started as a personal blog about coming out later in life evolved into something much larger. I started getting invited to speak at LGBTQ+ conferences, at college campuses, and at corporate diversity training sessions. I also began taking on more specific design work with LGBTQ+ organizations. I redesigned the website and branding for a local LGBT center, created materials for a national organization supporting older LGBTQ+ adults, and developed educational resources for families with LGBTQ members. The work was fulfilling in a way my corporate design projects had never been. Every logo I created, every website I built felt like it was contributing to visibility and acceptance. I was using my skills to make the world slightly better for people like me. I also started writing more seriously. What began as blog posts evolved into longer essays, and eventually, I was approached by a small publisher about writing a memoir. The idea terrified me, putting my entire story out there for public consumption, but Elena encouraged me. Your story could help thousands of women, she said. Women who think they're alone, who think it's too late, who need to see that change is possible. I spent a year writing the book, reliving every painful moment of my journey, but also recognizing how far I'd come. The book, titled Never Too Late, Finding Myself at 45, was published when I was 49. It wasn't a bestseller, but it found its audience, women like me, scattered across the country, living secret lives and wondering if change was possible. The reviews and messages I received were overwhelming. Women wrote to tell me they'd left their marriages after reading my book. Others said they'd found the courage to come out to their families. Some said they weren't ready to make changes yet, but knowing others had done it gave them hope. One review in particular stayed with me. It was from a 78-year-old woman named Dorothy. I'm too old now to start over, and my husband passed away 3 years ago. But reading this book helped me finally name what I felt my entire life. I'm a lesbian. I'm 78 years old, and I just said that out loud for the first time. Thank you for helping me die knowing at least one person understood. That review made me cry for an hour. The idea that my story could give Dorothy that moment of recognition and self-acceptance, even at 78, reminded me why sharing our truth matters. 3 years after I came out, my mother called me. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I almost didn't answer when I saw her name on the screen. Our relationship had been distant at best, with only occasional holiday texts and brief, uncomfortable phone calls. Sarah? It's Mom. Can we talk? Of course. There was a long pause. Then, I've been going to therapy. Your father and I both have. And I've been reading your blog. I was stunned. You have? I have, all of it. And your book, I bought it as soon as it came out. I've read it 3 times. Mom, let me say this before I lose my courage, she interrupted. I was wrong. About everything. I was so focused on what I thought was right, on what the church said, on what people would think, that I didn't see how much pain you were in. I didn't see that I was losing my daughter because of my own rigidity. I was crying now, unable to speak. I read about all those years you spent hiding, she continued, her own voice breaking. All the pain you carried. And I realized that I contributed to that. I created an environment where you felt you couldn't be honest with us. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I'm so sorry I wasn't the mother you needed. Mom, I want to meet her. Elena, I want to meet the woman who makes you happy. And I want to try to have a relationship with you again if you'll let me. That phone call was the beginning of a slow reconciliation. My mother didn't change overnight. She still had uncomfortable moments and said things that showed her discomfort. But she was trying. She and my father came to visit, met Elena, saw her home, and shared a meal with us. It wasn't perfect. My father was mostly silent, clearly still struggling with his own feelings. But my mother asked Elena about her teaching, looked at our photos together, and before they left, she hugged me and whispered, I'm proud of you for having the courage I never had. I learned later from my sister that my mother had also been struggling with her own identity throughout her marriage, not necessarily with her sexuality, but with what she'd sacrificed to be the perfect wife and mother. My coming out had forced her to confront questions about authenticity and choice that she'd been avoiding for decades. Our relationship would never be what it might have been if I'd felt safe to come out earlier. But it was something. And that something was Precious Stop by my 50th birthday. I'd helped dozens of women through the process of late life coming out. I developed what I called a roadmap based on my own experience and the experiences of others in my support groups. The roadmap had several key stages. First, you have to admit the truth to yourself. This seems obvious, but many women spend years knowing something is wrong without naming what it is. Before making any big decisions, take time to explore your feelings. Therapy is crucial here. Understanding yourself deeply helps prevent impulsive decisions you might regret. Before coming out more broadly, build a support network. Find a therapist, connect with others who've been through it, identify which friends and family members might be allies. Start having honest conversations with your spouse, if applicable. These are incredibly difficult but necessary. How you handle this matters deeply. After the initial crucial conversations, begin coming out to broader circles, friends, family, colleagues at your own pace. Deal with the logistics, legal, financial, living situations. This isn't romantic, but it's necessary. Start building your authentic life. This might mean dating, joining LGBTQ+ communities, developing new friendships, or simply learning to be comfortable as yourself. Eventually, being gay becomes just one part of who you are, not the defining feature of your entire existence. You reach a new normal. I created worksheets, suggested readings, and resource lists. But more than anything, I offered what had been most valuable to me, the knowledge that others had walked this path and survived it. One woman, Teresa, was 54 when she first attended my support group. She was married with 4 adult children and 8 grandchildren. The idea of disrupting all those relationships terrified her. What if my grandchildren aren't allowed to see me anymore? She asked the group, crying. What if I lose everyone? I couldn't promise her she wouldn't lose people some of us did. But I could promise her that living authentically would be worth it, and that she'd find new connections even if she lost old ones. Teresa took 2 years to work through the process. She went to therapy, had countless conversations with her husband, and eventually separated. 3 of her 4 children supported her. The 4th stopped speaking to her, which broke Teresa's heart. But the 3 who stood by her brought their children around. And Teresa got to be her authentic self with most of her grandchildren. I spent 54 years living for everyone else, Teresa told the group on her 1-year coming out anniversary. I'm spending however many years I have left living for me. And you know what? Even with the losses, I've never been happier. On my 50th birthday, Elena threw me a surprise party. Our house was filled with people from all the different chapters of my life, friends from college, colleagues, members of my support groups who'd become friends, my sister and her family, and even a few acquaintances from my marriage years who'd stayed in touch. As I looked around the room, I was struck by how different this gathering was from my 45th birthday party, the last one before everything changed. That party had been in the house I'd shared with David, filled with couples from our social circle. I'd smiled and thanked everyone for coming, but I'd felt utterly alone. This party was messy and loud and authentic. Women from my support groups were swapping stories with Elena's teacher friends. My niece Lily was there with her girlfriend. Someone had made a rainbow birthday cake. Pride flags hung alongside regular decorations. I wasn't the person everyone expected me to be. I was just myself. Elena gave a toast that made me cry. Again, I cried a lot more these days, but they were good tears. 5 years ago, I met a woman in a coffee shop who didn't yet know who she was. She was searching for something, though she couldn't name it. Now I'm married to a woman who knows exactly who she is, who lives boldly and authentically, and who helps other women find that same courage. Sarah, you're my hero. Happy birthday, my love. Later that night, after everyone had left and we were cleaning up, Elena asked me, "Do you have any regrets?" I thought about it carefully. I regret the pain I caused David. I regret not coming out earlier before so many people got caught in the fallout. But do I regret where I am now? Not for a second. What would you tell your 45-year-old self if you could go back? I'd tell her that the terror she feels is real, but so is the freedom waiting on the other side. I'd tell her that yes, she lose some people, but she find her true family. I'd tell her that 50 looks a lot different than she thinks it will, but it's not an ending, but a beginning. I paused, thinking. But mostly, I'd tell her to trust herself. To trust that voice inside that's been whispering the truth her whole life. Because that voice knows the way home. Now, at 51, I think a lot about legacy. Not in the grand sense I'm not changing the world, but in the small personal ways that our lives touch others. Through my writing, speaking, and support groups, I've connected with hundreds of women navigating similar journeys. Some are in their 30s, recognizing early what I didn't face until my 40s. Others are in their 60s and 70s, believing they've already lived most of their lives but wanting to live the remainder truthfully. Each person's journey is different. Some women leave their marriages. Others stay and find different arrangements with their husbands. Some date women exclusively. Others explore their bisexuality. Some come out publicly. Others remain private. There's no single right path, only the path that's authentic to each person. What matters is the choice to stop lying, to stop performing, to stop sacrificing your truth for comfort or convenience or other people's expectations. I've also learned that coming out later in life has unique challenges, but also unexpected gifts. I didn't have to navigate my sexuality as a teenager or young adult, which spared me some difficult years. But I also lived decades in hiding, which left scars. Neither path is better or worse, they're just different. The gift of coming out later is perspective. I know what I'm choosing because I've lived the alternative. I know the value of authenticity because I've experienced its absence. I know what real love feels like because I've experienced its shadow. Elena and I talk about the future often. We want to travel more. There's a list of places we want to visit together. We're considering fostering older LGBTQ+ youth who need supportive homes. We're thinking about writing a book together about relationships and late life coming out. But more than any specific plans, we're committed to continuing to live openly, to using our story to help others, and to building a life that reflects who we really are. If you've read this far, maybe you see yourself somewhere in my story. Maybe you're living a double life right now. Maybe you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, or beyond, feeling like it's too late to change course. Maybe you're married to someone who's a good person, but not the right person. Maybe you wake up every day feeling like you're wearing a costume. I want you to know, it's not too late. It's never too late. I won't tell you it will be easy. It won't be. You might lose people. You might face judgment. You might have to rebuild significant parts of your life. These aren't small things. But I will tell you that living authentically is worth every difficult conversation, every uncomfortable moment, every loss you might experience. Because the alternative spending the rest of your life as someone you're not is a worse loss than any relationship or reputation you might sacrifice. You deserve to be seen for who you really are. You deserve to be loved for your true self, not for the performance you've perfected. You deserve to wake up and recognize the person in the mirror. You deserve to experience real, reciprocal, passionate love with someone who sees all of you. At 45, I thought I knew who I was supposed to be. At 51, I'm still figuring out who I actually am, and that's okay. The journey of self-discovery doesn't end, it just becomes more honest. If you're reading this in secret, late at night when no one else is awake, knowing something in your life isn't right, I see you. You're not alone. And when you're ready, whenever that is, there's a whole community waiting to welcome you home to yourself. The life you're meant to live is waiting. It's never ever too late to claim it. I'm writing this final section at 56. Elena and I are sitting on our porch watching the sunset, and I'm reflecting on the decade since everything changed. We did end up fostering 3 LGBTQ plus teenagers over the past few years, providing them with a safe space during critical times in their lives. Watching these young people live openly in their teens, something I couldn't do, has been profoundly healing. My mother passed away last year after a short illness. In her final week, she told me she was proud of me. "You had courage I never found," she said. "Promise me you'll keep living boldly." I promised. My blog and book continue to reach people. Just last week, I received an email from a 68-year-old woman who's leaving her marriage after 45 years. "I read your book 5 years ago," she wrote, "and I've been working toward this moment ever since. Thank you for showing me it's possible." David remarried happily and has 2 stepchildren he adores. We exchange holiday cards and occasionally have coffee. The relationship we have now, honest, friendly, mutually supportive from a distance, is better than the marriage we had. Looking back at who I was at 45, sitting in that coffee shop about to meet Elena, I'm filled with compassion for that woman. She was so scared. She had no idea how strong she was. She couldn't imagine the life waiting for her on the other side of her fear. If I could tell her anything, it would be this: trust yourself. Take the leap. The fall is terrifying, but you'll learn to fly. That's what this story is really about, not just coming out or leaving a marriage or falling in love. It's about learning to fly after spending your whole life believing you were meant to stay on the ground. And you can learn too. Whenever you're ready, you can spread your wings. The sky's waiting.